NOVA is the largest social policy research institute. As an institute in itself, our history is not that long. It goes back to 1996. But at that time, NOVA started as a more specialized institute within aging studies, youth studies, welfare and social security studies. Our mandate given by the government is, and I'll read it, to enhance knowledge on social issues and change with a particular focus on social problems and living conditions. As I said, if you study rankings of almost everything which is good in life, you will find Norway very much on the top. And one sort of simplistic explanation could be that, well, of course, the Norwegians do very well because they have oil. So we've been very lucky. But as a social scientist, I would argue that there is more than luck to the Norwegian story. If we study what has happened in the Norwegian society, say the last 15 years, I'm very confident that historians will conclude that the first decade of the 2000s was a period of considerable and quite dramatic reforms. In 2002, we had the old system of state-run hospitals. We had 19 counties, and each of the counties owned their hospitals, had the responsibility for the health situation of their citizens. In 2002, this system was rationalized. The country was divided into 5 regions with one sort of enterprise within each region. Why was this? Well, it was both a reform in order to enhance efficiency through specialization, but it was a way of overcoming local quarrels. We are very good at local quarrels in this country. Where should the new hospital be built? That's a guaranteed sort of local battle. So it was a kind of trying to sort of make a rational system of hospital which could sort of take the coming problems of the population. And so, the second, in 2007, is the NAV reform. What happened with NAV? Well, we came from the first post-war welfare state, the 50s, with a very rational system that, okay, there was one organization handling pensions. Then there was one organization handling labor market problems and unemployment insurance, and then one organization handling poverty programs. In a way, a quite sort of rational division of labor. Now, what happened during the 80s and the 90s was that, and very much sort of insights brought by social science, saying that sort of problems of poverty, unemployment, and the relationship to the social security system is very complex. Very complex, okay? And we found a lot of data sort of saying or showing how people was sort of sent from one organization to the next, okay? You are not unemployed, you are poor, you do not belong to us, you should be there, okay? And they say, no, you're not poor, you are disabled, so you should be in that system, okay? A lot of sort of irrationalities in the system, which historically was quite rational, okay? So the consequence of the complexity of social problems led and was the argument for what is a huge merger the poverty programs, the unemployment labor market administration, and the pension system was sort of merged into one organization. That is the largest merger in Norwegian history. The whole of the welfare state is put into one organization with 17,000 people working there. It also, because historically the poverty measures was at the local community level, whereas labor market policies and social insurance and pensions was at the state level. So when we merge these organizations, we get new tensions. What is the role of the local community versus the role of the central state? Now that tension is built into the NAV reform. In 2011, we introduced an entirely new pension system. So leaving the defined benefit system, making it a defined contribution system. What we in fact do is that we leave the insurance system and introduce more like a savings system with inbuilt mechanisms. So, and the new system is, if people live longer, pension is automatically reduced. Why? Well, in order to sort of secure that the aging of the population, and we do not know the rise of longevity in the future. So if we do not put mechanisms into the new pension system which takes that into account, we could risk making a pension system which is very, very generous for those who live very, very long lives, but dramatically unfair to the young people who will have to pay the bill. Okay, new pension system. And then in 2012, what we call the integrated care reform. Why? Well, when we talk about health, we talk about very different services. On the one hand, we have the very specialized treatment of specific diagnosis. Okay? On the other hand, the health sector is also taking care of people who are very old and might have different kind of illnesses, dementia, and so on, but it's an illusion to believe that we should treat them or put very much resources into solving their health problem, because life is going to an end. So, I mean, I'm very frank with you now, but of course, a responsible policymaker has to take that into account. It is not sensible, it's probably not morally right to use the kind of specialized, technology-intensive, very expensive system of health and to sort of use that on the problems which comes with the aging of the population. It's an impossible project. So therefore, in 2012, this integrated care reform, which says basically that it's the objective of the system is to assist people to live decently with more, to assist people to live decent life with health problems, instead of sort of trying to produce an illusion that the health system can come and make you live forever. Second, and that is a philosophy that if we are to meet the future successful, people must work. At the level of labor market participation that we now have, about 76% for men and 74% for women, if we are to increase labor market participation from that level, we have to mobilize people with different kinds of problems, handicaps, and so on, which is a huge challenge. But in the future, we cannot afford simply paying benefits, cash benefits to these people. Although they have some problems, they still have some partial work capacity, and we need to utilize that, which is the economic argument, and then comes the social argument that the quality of life is better if you take part in regular activities in the labor market rather than simply receiving a sum of money from the state. So that activation and work produce more quality of life than passive money transfers. Okay, we are reforming our welfare state, but there is still some sort of very significant continuities. All citizens is insured by the state, the universalism maintained. No signs of sort of targeted programs. System is reformed within the universalist frame, tax financed and rights based. No turn towards funding or that people should pay themselves. But of course there are problems. We have increased the production of health and care services tremendously, but costs also rise. When we improve the quality of services, expectations is also rise. People do not get enough. I mean, a health system is never good enough. Okay, that's a quite difficult problem for politicians. The health care reform has been criticized for removing health issues from democratic debate and moving it into the responsibility of professional managers. What should be the role of democracy versus sort of professional managers in the welfare areas? Which, I'm a political scientist by training originally, which in fact is a quite exciting discussion. Now, if you are to successfully prepare for the future, well, the future is basically unknown, but something can be said. And what is the least uncertain? Well, that is the demographic development. Okay, but one thing is to count and to sort of estimate the number of people 90 plus and so on, 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. That is one thing. But those who are 90 in 20 years, 30 years' time, how would they think? What would be their preferences? What would be their economic positions? What would they prefer? Okay? Now, we want to know more in order to sort of prepare wisely. And the use of register data and panel data in which we follow people over time and study how sort of their worldviews, their behavior, quality of life, what they find interesting, what they find boring, what they hate, what they like, is in a way a kind of, not perfect, but it's a kind of method to assist planning. Now, how do we prepare for the coming demographic transition? The pension reform I mentioned. Now, just say what is the core elements. First, as a typical sort of Scandinavian model feature, there is a guaranteed minimum for all, irrespective of work performance. The level is about 1/3 of an average income. Second, we have abolished the idea of a pension age. From history, we came with first it was 70 years, then it was 67, in some occupation it was 65, and so on. Been scrapped. Aging is a very individual process. Some people at the age of 70 are fully sort of capable of taking full work, so it has been abolished. Instead has come, in a way, a very strong market-inspired system saying that the more you work, the longer you work, the more income you have earned during your life, the higher your pension will be, which is a very strong incentive for people to postpone retirement, to work longer. Still, and I think that is a very significant element of the Nordic model, the financing of benefits are not based on payroll taxes. It's based on the general tax system. For example, VAT and turnover taxes. Why is that? Why are we so conscious in not financing the welfare state on payroll taxes? Because we are an exporting economy. Payroll taxes for Social Security is a burden on all companies who export. Had we been a closed economy, no problem. So therefore, in order to sort of overcome the systemic tension between capitalist productivity and competitiveness and generous welfare state, we have taken the financing of the welfare state from production to consumption. That's what we've done. And I think that is a sometimes overlooked characteristic of the Nordic model. So, first, pension reform. The second, inclusive labor market participation, very important in order to prepare for the future. We cannot afford young people entering, for example, into early retirement benefits. We have to utilize their work or remaining or partial work capacity, and we know also from registered data, if you keep people in work, you keep them healthy. And if you keep them healthy, their need for expensive care services later in life decrease. So it's good economy and good social policy to get people into work as early and as often as possible. The last thing, and I've been working with that, and that is how to develop a old age care policy which is directed to assisting the self-help of the old in order to sort of make people take care of themselves. That is what people want, and it's much cheaper than producing institutionalized services. So a whole new agenda has risen on technology. Maybe there is a revolution coming in the use of technology in order to sort of preserve and maintain the capacity to take care of one's own life. Smart houses, also technologies which can make the profession, because we will have institutions, we will have professionals sort of producing care services, but in a way they still have not come to the Industrial Revolution. Will the outcome, if we meet in 25 years, system reforms takes time to produce expected results. Well, there are some signs, for example, that the abolishment of the standard pension age just 2 years ago has in fact already produced a rise in the average pension age. That we are certain, that we can tell from registered data. But, so what is a reform effect and what is much more of a cohort effect, cannot say yet. In the last 6 years, the number of jobs in this country has risen from 2.2 to 2.5 million. 50,000 new jobs per year in a country which now has 5 million inhabitants. Tremendous growth in jobs, the number of jobs. Is it wise governance? Well, the government will say, of course, now you can see the reforms are working, blah, blah, blah. Or is it China? Why do I say China? Well, because the entering of China into the global economy has been to an tremendous advantage for Norway. Why? Because what China wants is oil, energy, metals, fish. Norway produces oil and also have a huge fish sector. What do we buy? Consumer goods. And we get them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper from China. So the balance of trade, the implication of China entering the world stage has been to a tremendous importance and positive effect for us. That's why we say we're a global winner. Will this last? Well, we don't know. So in 10 years' time, 15 years, we can meet again and we can come back.